All right, hello everybody. As he's mentioned, my name is Lauren. I'm here to talk about Kora and how we're unlocking growth. I've been working for this company for about 10 months now. I'm really excited to be a part of this project. So let's get underway. So Kora is unlocking growth by linking decentralized cooperative groups with global fixed income markets. It's a bit of a mouthful, but this in essence is what we do. So worldwide, we believe there's an uneven distribution of capital. And this is often in favor of those that already have some capital, those from developed countries, and those that have assets to secure against any loans or investments. And what we find is that those businesses in the developing countries that need capital in order to be able to sustain themselves, as well as think about growing, they really struggle to they really struggle to get their hands on it. And we find this quite interesting because people are always looking to get returns on their investments. People are always looking to get higher yields. And if we consider New York, for instance, a 4 or 5% return on a bond these days is considered quite decent. But we're operational in Nigeria at the moment, and we're turning over 100% profit. We're returning 50% profit in under 6 months. And we're talking about the agricultural market here. The industry itself is worth $5 trillion, and only a small portion of that is securitized. 94% of land is family owned. 75% of land is smallholder. But we find that these smallholder businesses, they really struggle to get capital. It's almost impossible for them to get a loan. And we find this is largely because they don't have any assets that are considered investment grade, which leads us onto this perception of this high credit risk when dealing with these producers. And by producers, we're talking manufacturing, farming, growing, textiles, artisanal, all of the above. So there's this high perceived credit risk when it comes to these producers, and this is often because they might not have access to a bank account, which means they probably don't have any formal credit history. Some of them don't even have ID. And this is something that we're dealing with quite significantly in our current beta in Nigeria. And another thing that we find that creates this high credit risk is these businesses tend to be quite vulnerable to shocks. Famine, drought, even changes in the exchange rate. These can all have mass detrimental effects against these businesses and stop them from even continuing to run, let alone thinking about creating economies of scale. And so there's a couple of things we think we can do to help reduce this risk. And one of these things is by increasing transparency. Transparency for the investors. Often when money goes into a business, it'll go somewhere relatively high up. It'll get deposited and might trickle down the business somewhere. But no one really knows where this money goes. No one really knows how this money is being spent. And so what we want to do is we want to increase transparency for the investors. We want to give them governance over how that money is being used. If investors aren't happy with the way that funds are being dispersed, they won't be dispersed. And so this is one way we think we can help to reduce the credit risk, is by increasing this transparency and giving the investors more confidence. Another thing we think we can do to help reduce this risk is by creating sustainable high growth businesses. It seems like quite a simple thing, but a simple thing is also having basic access to formal financial services. Things like identity, things like being able to pay your suppliers or receive payment from your suppliers. And by giving access to these small and medium businesses over in these developing countries, we think we can resolve a lot of the issues that they deal with that actually prevent them from being able to be a part of the global financial system. And so this is what Kora does. What Kora is building is these mini inclusive financial systems, and we're linking investors to them. So this is essentially what we are. We're an investment bank for the emerging market. And this is our revenue model as well. You know, if we go back to this agricultural market, $5 trillion, almost none of it is securitized. Conservatively, if we can securitize even 5% of that, that's 25 billion globally and annually that we can make. And so specifically how we're able to do this is by providing infrastructure. And we're doing this on the blockchain. We're building our own blockchain, and I'll speak about why in a second. But through this infrastructure, we're able to provide services such as identity, money transfer, lending. We're able to make sure it's all compliant. And by the way, these services are going to be available with or without access to the internet. You know, we're working with 25,000 users in Nigeria at the moment. 80% of them don't have ID. Most of them don't have access to the internet. But all of them are still going to be able to access our services. And we're working with telecom providers over in Nigeria to help provide these services via SMS and USSD. But by the way, for those of you that do have access to internet, our app is available on Android and it's coming soon to iOS, so feel free to download that. So going back to why we have to build our own architecture, why we're having to build our own blockchain. When it came to researching blockchains about a year ago and what one we may be able to use, we couldn't find any that met our requirements for financial services. You know, specifically speaking, data privacy, auditability, scalability, which I think is something that most blockchains are struggling to find a solution around, and flexibility. And specifically going back to this data privacy, as you mentioned earlier, we've got GDPR coming into play. And if we can't be compliant with that, then we can't deal with the licensed entities in the EU. So this was a non-negotiable issue for us. So we decided to build our own blockchain. And as such, we've created a blockchain that is financial services specific. And how this works, without going into too much detail, is we've got these mini financial systems, and they will run their own private consensus rounds on their own private network. And these little clouds down here is where they store all the data. So they keep their own records, they keep their own books, they keep their own data privacy. But the transaction itself gets hashed onto the mainnet or the public blockchain. And so if there's ever a dispute in any sort of he said, she said situation, all they need to do is point the transaction up to the main blockchain. They can confirm, yes, this transaction data matches. Yes, this is the timestamp. Yes, this is the private signature. And so building a public blockchain, we need a token to go along with it. Otherwise, nobody's going to be incentivized to commit blocks. So we've created our token, the Kora Network Token, or KNT, and we are running an ICO so we can help decentralize ownership of KNT and therefore our network. And we're drawing on a relatively rich history of an algorithm that's been used quite successfully in the past and is having variants of it created for future use. And this algorithm is delegated proof of stake. And this is used by the likes of EOS, used by BitShares, Cosmos, Lisk, to name a few. And essentially token holders, they're going to get governance on the network. So they're going to be able to have a say and vote in who becomes the block producers or who doesn't. Additionally, they're going to be able to receive block rewards or a portion of the transaction fee as block rewards along with the block producers. So just a few more slides. So we're currently operational in Nigeria. We've got 25,000 farmers, and we're dealing with domestic payments with them. We're resolving issues around that, and the three issues mainly being the cost and time for traveling 2 hours to the city every 2 weeks, the lack of efficiency in terms of having to wait 2 weeks for your payment, and also the risk regarding carrying cash all the way back to your city. But we've got a couple of other betas lined up as well. We've got Peru and Bangladesh. Peru is a similar beta to Nigeria, but we're working with coffee farmers and coffee exporters and dealing with payment systems around that. The Bangladesh one is probably our next biggest one. It's a little bit different. We're working with the Bangladesh cooperative bank over there that's got over 35,000 users, and we're doing a 30 million equity offering with them. And we're going to distribute tokens which are backed by shares in their company. And the interesting thing about this is it's only going to be offered to Bangladeshi diaspora. So those Bangladeshis that are living in the UK, in the EU, in the Middle East, wherever, they're going to be able to invest in the development of their own country. And a couple of years later, they're also going to be able to collect dividends from that as well. But another thing that we're doing with Bangladesh is we're redesigning the back end of their system. So this cooperative is still working on a paper and pen-based model. It's obviously very inefficient. It's not secure at all. And so what we're doing is we're going to move this system onto a blockchain-based architecture. We expect to have at least 100,000 users by the end of 2018, and you can see we've got a few other pilots in the works as well. So this is our fantastic team. Obviously, to point out a few, we've got Dixon and Mau Mau. They're our co-founders. Dixon's background is from the UN. This is his third financial inclusion startup as well, one of which was previously already acquired. Mau Mau, whose background is in fintech and in AI. And another person to point out, we've also got a full-time CFO on board as well. We are thinking about becoming a licensed entity somewhere down the line, and so in order to do this we need to make sure that our books are completely compliant. We've also got Gideon Ortega, so he's on the ground running our African beta full-time. He has previously worked for an NGO in Africa working towards financial inclusion as well for 5 years. So he's the best guy that we could have to do this. And here we've got some of our partners and advisors. So we've got Morrison Forrester, they're our legal counsel, PwC are our accountants. Another thing is that we haven't designed our framework from scratch. So we're using the same framework that's been used by the Central Bank of Cambodia through Soromitsu. We're also working with Seller and Ripple to help with our liquidity and cross-border payments. And we've also got some very impressive advisors on board as well, one of which is Faisal Khan. He's a leading banking and payments consultant. There's not very many experts in this field, especially when it comes to cross-border payments, and so we're very lucky to have him on board, and he's helping us with designing our structure for how we're going to move forward with that later as well. And that's Kora.
Are there any questions? Just to make rows of 4. Here's a question.
So in, for example, Venezuela, you really see that governments try to keep funds away from people. Don't you think that, well, do you expect a lot of resistance from governments against your project?
So the one thing that we really haven't had any issue with is getting people on board. We are working to be compliant. We're not looking to replace banks. We're providing the infrastructure for anybody, any kind of financial service providers, be them government organisation, banks, or smaller and more local agents that are offering similar things. We're offering them the infrastructure to offer this at a cheaper and more efficient cost and service for them. So the one thing that we've really not struggled with is getting people on board.
So what platform are you launching your ICO on?
So we're running on an Ethereum testnet. Currently, but we've got our blockchain currently being developed, and that'll be released later this year.
So first Ethereum ICO and then a dedicated blockchain.
Yeah, so our token is ERC20, and like say at the moment our beta and everything is being run on the Ethereum testnet, and then shortly we'll be moving over to the mainnet.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Cool.
I got a question as well.
Oh yeah.
I saw the Eternity logo on your sheet as a strategic partner.
Yeah, so that's the one thing that I'm not really permitted to speak about just at the moment. We're waiting to do a press release together. So
okay.
All in good time.
All right. All right, so...
disappointing answer.
Thanks a lot.
No worries. I think that guy... no,
one more?
changed his mind.
So yeah, I want to thank you. Also, I would like to say that, as we discussed during dinner, that You mentioned that you're like that you want to promote crypto among women. So I really like that, because I think there's too few initiatives and a few strong or women with strong crypto knowledge that want to transfer the knowledge on other women.
Yeah.
So yeah, perhaps you can come back one time and.
I mean, look around the room. It's great that we've had some more females enter in the last couple of hours, but it's still unbelievably uneven. And so, yeah, I mean, it's so fantastic when we can see more women entering the space.
All right, so that would be great. So thanks a lot, and yes, she came all the way over from Berlin. So please give her a warm applause.